Good morning, everyone. I'm Frestianira Diansi Torresmi with student number 112011133170. And today I'm going to present about this week's topic, which is the dual process model of social cognition. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the table contents. So here we're going to first talk about the historical and conceptual development of the dual process models. And then we're going to see its application in four topics, which is responding to persuasive message, and stereotypes and prejudice, forming impression of others, and then accounts of reasoning. And for the last part, we're going to talk a little bit about the criticism and future outlook of dual process models. Okay, so the first section is historical and conceptual development of the dual process model. Okay, so first, what is a dual process model? So the defining characteristic of dual process model is they're dividing mental processes underlying social judgment and behavior into an automatic and controlled fashion. And later we're going to talk a little bit about how to differentiate between automatic and controlled processes. And so next, we're going to talk about the history of the dual process theories or models. So during its early days, dual process theories are more focused on domain-specific phenomena, which includes, for example, three of our topic that we will discuss later, which is persuasion, prejudice, and stereotyping, and then in impression formation. So they're only contained within one specific domain, the phenomena. So uh, they might not be able to they might not be applicable to other phenomena and just mainly applicable in one specific phenomena. Whereas in the past decade, the focus shifted towards more integrative models that aim at identifying general principles assumed to be domain independent. So nowadays it's not mainly applied in just one specific phenomena, but we are looking more into a basic principle that can be applied in more generally. And then there are two types of this present fashion. The first one is generalized dual process theories. So generalized dual process theories describe mental processing by means of two domain independent operating principles, whereas formalized dual process theories are looking into quantifying the contributions of distinct mental processes to behavioral responses by means of mathematical modeling techniques. So here we're going to talk about one theories on the generalized dual process theories, and but we're not going to talk about any from the formalized dual process theories. Okay, so now how to differentiate from automaticity and control. So here I included I wrote the four horsemen of automaticity, which is intentionality, efficiency, controllability, and awareness. So these four characteristics are what differentiates automaticity from control. And so the characteristics for automaticity processes are they're elicited unintentionally, they require little amounts of cognitive resources, they cannot be stopped voluntarily, and they occur outside of our conscious awareness. Whereas the characteristic for controlled process are the inverse of the characteristic of the automaticity. So in the early era of dual process theories, these automaticity versus control is an all or none fashion. So a process can be either automatic or controlled. So basically, a person can be uh, categorized or characterized either by the four features of automaticity or by the four features of controlled fashion. But it turns out that no process whatsoever meets all four conditions. So they could be automatic in a sense, but also controlled in another. So for example, uh, wait. Okay, so for example, process A is automatic in a sense that they are they are um, they are elicited unintentionally, but process A is also automatic. No, controlled in a sense that they require considerable amounts of cognitive resources. And so a disjunctive conceptualization is born. So a process can be called either automatic or controlled if they meet at least one condition. So with the example of process A can be called automatic because it is um, unintentional, and they can also be called controlled because they require considerable amounts of cognitive resources. So with the application of this disjunctive conceptualization, what we must be careful about is the terminology. So we have to make sure to mention the condition, otherwise it will create confusion. So for example, process A is automatic because it is unintentional. But if the writer only state that process A is automatic, the readers wouldn't know the nature of the other three conditions. For example, is it voluntary or involuntary, and so on. So we need to emphasize in which sense it is automatic. So it is automatic in the intentionality sense, and it can be controlled in the controllability sense. Okay, so next we're going to talk about two theories regarding responding to persuasive message. So the first one is elaborative likelihood process. I'm so sorry, I think I make a mistake here. So it is actually elaboration likelihood process. So in this module, the central notion is that attitude change occurs along an elaboration continuum whereby persuasion is determined by how motivated and able an individual is to engage in effortful information processing. So what we need to emphasize here is the elaboration and the motivation part. So to make it simple, if the perceiver, if us if we are motivated in the persuasion process, then we are likely to engage more in our thinking process. So we will focus on a more important stuff rather than uh, other characteristics in the persuasion process. They are not mainly about the things they are being persuaded about. So, the higher an individual's cognitive elaboration is, the more likely he or she is to process all object relevant information. So, relevant information is, for example, if I am I'm trying to persuade my friends to watch a movie, then the relevant information will be the description about the movie, what makes it worthy to watch. And then the non uh, there are also a lot of information that are not object relevant, which is we will call it peripheral cues. So this is all the information that is not related to the object, but uh, can be a defining factor of uh, the persuasion. So we can be persuaded by those informations too, even though it's not actually related to the object. So in this model, there are two routes. The first one is the central route. So how this route works is that first we are assessing all available object relevant information, and then we integrate it with stored knowledge, and then we form a carefully considered evaluation. So a central route requires a high elaboration, so we need to be motivated in the persuasion process in order to have a high elaboration. So because we are motivated, then we focus more on the object rather than the peripheral cues. And then the peripheral route is basically what we consider here in making judgment is we usually use cursory examination or heuristic and other types of information processing shortcuts. And the result, if basically if we are convinced this way, so if we are persuaded by using this method, then that our we're persuaded, but it won't want it probably would not last long because the persuasion is relatively weak and it is susceptible to counter persuasion, and it is less predictive of behavior. So for example, if I'm convincing my friends about uh, for to watch a movie and they're persuaded, but if they're persuaded because of a peripheral cues, then they might feel like, okay, I might watch this movie someday, but it might not actually translate into a behavior, which they probably will not actually watch the movie. They will just be intrigued to watch it, but they won't really watch it because uh, it is again relatively weak and it is less predictive of our actual behavior. And then an example I made here is Sita or me is recommending a romance movie. So my argument or my persuasion is that I do it by describing the movie. So the argument here is that movie A is a romance movie starring actor B and actress C. It has a good plot and the ending is realistic. So if my friends were persuaded because they engage in high elaboration process, which is the central root, then they will be convinced because of the whole argument. So they're convinced because I say it has a good plot, the ending is realistic because it is starred by actor B and actress C, and etc. And then if my friends are persuaded because of but by low elaboration, which is by using peripheral root, there are two possibilities. So the first one is if they are using cursory examination, then they might be attracted by just a subset of parts of the argument. So for example, they are attracted because of the cast, because for example they like actor B or actress C, that's why they watch it because of that. So they're not focusing on the whole argument, but they're only focusing on certain parts of the argument that interest them. And then the second possibility is if they're focusing on the heuristic information, they will be persuaded because, for example, I am their friend, so they trust my opinion. That's why they're persuaded to watch the movie. But it's not because of the argument itself, it's because of peripheral cues, which, for example, is the persuader, which is me, their friend. And then Okay, so in ELM, there's also a hypothesis, which is the multiple roles hypothesis. So the notion is that a given variable, or by the term I'm using earlier, information, can influence attitudes by different processes at different points along the elaboration continuum. So basically, just because, for example, just because it's a peripheral cue doesn't mean it cannot influence a high elaboration, even though high elaboration is in the central root and not in the peripheral root. So they can, just that high elaboration increases the impact of primary features of the persuasive message, whereas low elaboration increases the impact of secondary cues. So the example I give here is Sita, who loves to watch romance movies, is recommending a romance drama versus recommending a thriller movie. So, for example, if in a low elaboration, uh, the the persuader Sita, we already know how it can influence it through the cursory and the peripheral cues, but Sita is essentially a peripheral cues, right? So peripheral cues, which is here theta, can also influence in high elaboration. So for example, if Sita who loves to watch romance movie is recommending a romance drama, then it will be it's like a plus point in a high elaboration in a central root, because there is a correlation between Sita who loves to watch romance movies with recommending romance drama. So because Sita loves to watch romance movie, that probably means that she has a good taste in romance drama. She has a vast knowledge about romance movies or dramas in general. So in high elaboration route, it could be a plus point towards the persuasion. Whereas if Sita who loves to watch romance movies is recommending a thriller movie, then it will not be a plus point because there is no correlation between Sita who loves to watch romance movies and a thriller movie. So, as the example I presented earlier, we can conclude that any persuasion variable or information here can influence attitudes in can influence attitudes, right? And so the notion in this hypothesis is that it can uh, influence attitudes in four different ways. The first one is by serving as an argument, and then the second one by serving as a cue, and then the third one is by determining the extent of cognitive elaboration, and then the last one is by producing a bias in the processing of the available information. Okay, so now I'm going to present one experiment in ELM. Okay, so this is a presentation by Allison Davis and Webb and Short from 2017, and the title is Persuasion and Crowdfunding, an Elaboration Likelihood Model of Crowdfunding Performance. So in this research, they're looking into finding whether or not happens in the crowdfunding performance. So uh, so here they are exploring the persuasion process between entrepreneur and the founders. So they're trying to see whether ELM happens in that process. So the object relevant information is here is the entrepreneur specific relevant information about education and experience, such as what is the education background of the entrepreneur, and what kind of experience does they have in the field. So they're looking to see if this information is taken into consideration by the funders in making a judgment. And then the peripheral cues is a personal dream, group identity, and positive narrative tone. So, for example, here, group identity. Maybe the founders will identify themselves with the entrepreneur because from the same group identity. For example, they're from the same race, or they come from the same city, or anything like that. So that is the peripheral cue. So it's not related to, it shouldn't be related to the topic, because the founders are uh, they should be persuaded by the entrepreneur themselves, but because of their qualification in that field, which is here is presented by education and experience, whereas things like personal dream, group identity, and positive narrative tone is more about the persuader, which is the peripheral cues, and it's not related to how well the entrepreneur themselves do in the field. And then the results found here is that a positive relation between object relevant informations and crowdfunding performance is strengthened under conditions of higher elaboration likelihood, and also positive relation between peripheral cues and crowdfunding performance is strengthened under condition of lower elaboration likelihood. So the notions in ELM indeed happened in the crowdfunding performance, as proven as per yeah just as how the evidence found in this research. And then the next one is the heuristic systemic model. So I think the heuristic systemic model is almost the same as the elaboration likelihood model. The similarity here being the central root is similar to systemic processing. So central root is the process, how we call the process, the high elaboration process in ELM, whereas systemic processing is how we call the high elaboration process in the HSM. And then the counterpart of for the peripheral root is called the heuristic processing. So this both is for the low elaboration, and it requires low motivation too. And so the difference between LMN and HSM is that in ELM, the importance of one processing mode decreases as the importance of the other processing mode increases. Whereas for the HSM, the two processes can influence evaluation simultaneously, so they can co-occur and interact with each other. Between the heuristic and the systemic processing, they can co-occur and influence each other, whereas in the ELM, one happens with it's either a central root that is happening or in the peripheral root that is happening, so they cannot coexist. And then this co-occurrence is they have three hypotheses about this. So about the simultaneous influence of the two processes. So the first hypothesis is the attenuation hypothesis, which the notion is that systemic process completely override the effects of heuristic process. So this notion could happen when the systematic processing yields information that contradicts the validity of simple persuasion heuristic. So we will choose the systemic processing rather than the heuristic process because their information is contradicting, and we use high elaboration in systematic processing. That's why we believe in it more. And then in the second hypothesis is additivity hypothesis, where both processes jointly influence evaluation. So this notion can happen when two processing models, the two do not yield conflicting reactions. So if they both agree they agree on something and then it's not conflicting, then they can coexist and they make joint influence. So the judgment will be made jointly by both the systemic and heuristic process. And then the last one is bias hypothesis, where a heuristic process bias the effects of systemic process. So the bias hypothesis happens when the argument is ambiguous. So we rely more on the heuristic process by so here if the message is ambiguous, then the heuristic process will rely us to the biases that we have about the argument. So uh, for example, if I give an argument about a movie, but my argument is ambiguous, then my friends might be persuaded because I am their friend, and so they just believe it because it's me, even though the argument is ambiguous. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the systemic processing. So there is a principle in the systemic processing which is called the sufficient principle. So the notion is that individuals are more likely to engage in systemic processing when the difference between their desired and their actual levels of confidence is high. And the systemic process is influenced by defense motivation, which refers to the desire to defend pre-existing attitudes, and impression management, which refers to the desire to hold attitudes that satisfies specific social goals. So it is important to note that this defense motivation and impression management is the proof on why systemic processing can be biased too, because uh, yeah, it serves a goal and it's not totally unbiased. Okay, so the next section is stereotypes and prejudice. So the model we are going to talk about here is the continuum model. So the notion is that the processes by which people form opinions of other individuals operate along a continuum that reflects the degree to which perceivers utilize category related version, category related versus person specific information. So basically, when we are judging someone, uh, this continuum model shows how we use category related or person specific information. And so we generally assume that we rely more on category related rather than a person specific information. Why is that? So what we need to know about the categorization, which is using category related information in judging someone, is that it is usually prioritized because it does not require substantial amount of cognitive sources. And then it is based on salient category cues, and we usually do it unintentionally. So, wait. So I'll just explain it using an example here. So, for example, if I'm looking for a philosopher, and so the picture of philosopher in my head is, for example, someone who is like an old man, an old bearded man wearing glasses, etc., etc. And so in a room, I see several people, and then I will, first of all, for example, I see someone uh, that is young looking, and then they they don't have beard, they don't wear glasses. So I will make an initial categorization that uh, for example, they don't look intellectual or something. Like I will categorize them and we will call the result as an initial categorization. So because I'm looking for a philosopher and then that target, I judge them as being irrelevant to my momentary goals, which is to find a philosopher, then my final impression towards that target will be just based exclusively on the initial categorization I made before. And then I see another target in the room, and he looks he's an old man. He has a beard, and he wears glasses. And then I judge them as being relevant to my mandatory goals, which is to find a philosopher. So I will attempt to integrate more person-specific attributes to add into the initial categorization that I already made. So into making a coherent impression of the target. And then there are three possible outcomes when I am integrating a person's specific attributes toward that target that I deem as relevant to my momentary goals. So the first one is, wait. So the first one is using initial categorization. So for example, the example with this will be, for example, if I see him reading a book about philosophy, then that additional information is interpreted as consistent with my initial categorization, which is that he is probably an intellectual guy. So I will use my initial categorization as a final outcome of the processing. But then, if the additional information is deemed inconsistent with the initial categorization, then I will attempt to recategorize the target in an attempt to find a more suitable category than the initial one. So, for example, if I see him uh, watching a music video instead, or I don't know, playing games, then I will probably uh, think that that additional information is inconsistent with my initial categorization. So uh, I will recategorize him into a new categorization. And then the third one will be a piecemeal integration. So wait. So piecemeal integration only happen if I think my recategorization is still not the right final judgment about the person. So if I think that my recategorization is not right, then try to uh, I will try to assess the target one by one, by attribute, to make a more wholesome judgment about them. And what we need to know is that this piecemeal integration rarely happens. Um, I think because the perceivers, which is me, tend to construct ad hoc theories to account for contradictory information in the initial stages of the impression information continuum. So here is the model of the continuum model, but it's basically the same as what I just explained earlier. Then the next one will be for me impression of others. So here we're going to talk about a dual process model. So the notion in the dual process model is that the impression formation may take either a top-down or bottom-up route. And so here I believe I made some mistake. So here is I wrote personalization here, so it's not supposed to be personalization, it's supposed to be stop. And then in the bottom up processing, I wrote symbol elaboration, and it should be symbol impression instead. So how this dual process model work is that in making judgment about others, Uh, we we first of all we always start by identifying the salient features of the target. So for example, okay, I'm looking for a philosopher, and then when I see my target, I will try to identify their salient features. Which for example, I see someone who is young, uh, not bearded, doesn't wear glasses. And if I think that it is irrelevant to my goal, which is to find a philosopher, then uh, my judgment about them will be just that. So uh I won't make any inferences whatsoever. I won't try to proceed further. I will just stop at that. And but then if I for example see a target that is an old man who has a beard, who wears glasses, and then I deem them as being relevant to my goal, which is a philosopher, then and the process further can be either a bottom-up processing or a top-down processing. So the bottom-up processing requires a high involvement, and then it is person-based, and then it is interpersonal orientated. So I, the perceiver, are assumed to draw inferences directly from the identified features. Uh, but that doesn't mean that this is uh, an effortful process or anything. And the quality of the judgment is actually determined by the elaboration. So if I as the perceiver have high elaboration, then the conclusion I will make a complex impression. But if I have low elaboration, then the impression will be simple. And then it could also go with the top-down processing. So the top-down processing, uh, inversely with the bottom-up processing, it requires low involvement, and then it is usually category based, and then it's intergroup orientated. So basically, if the bottom-up processing is making inferences based off of the person and the person that is being judged, the top-down processing is usually as making association between the target with certain groups. So the steps here is that first we categorize them, the target, excuse me, into a group, and then we will eliminate it with stereotype, and then there could be two possibilities. So let me explain further. So in the first step, which is the categorization, the salient features can be used to make a category. So for example, in the target I used earlier, which is an old man, an old bearded man that is wearing glasses. For example, I can categorize him into, um, for example, a lecturer or something. And then I will progress further into in the second step, which is to eliminate with stereotype. So from the earlier step, which is the categorization, the category can uh, they can activate stereotypic content. So for example, I categorize that man as, for example, a lecturer, and then the stereotypic content for a lecturer is that someone intelligent, someone wise, etc. And then with those stereotypic content, if it is relevant to my initial goal, which is a philosopher, then I will proceed further. But the stereotypic content that is irrelevant to my goal will be ignored. And then in the third process, there are two possibilities. So I can either stereotype or I can make an individuation. So the stereotyping happen if the target related information is consistent with the stereotype. So my final judgment will be just the stereotype. Whereas for the individuation, it happen if the target related information is inconsistent with the stereotype. So I will proceed further uh, by examining attribute by attribute into making a more personal judgment. Okay, so this is the model of the the dual process model, which is basically the same as I uh, explained earlier. And then on the next section, we will discuss about accounts of reasoning. So the model we choose here is System 1 and System 2 processing. So System 1 and System 2 is basically like a thinking process where System 1 is it represents our intuition. So it is assumed as something like a process that is more fast, parallel, automatic, effortless, associative, slow learning, and emotional, where System 2 represent our reasoning. And it is more slow, it is more serial, it is controlled, effortful, rule governed, fast learning, and then emotionally neutral. So usually people will say that System 2 is more rational rather than System 1, and System 1 is more emotional. And then, so the output for System 1 is impression, while we call it impression, and then the output for System 2, we call it as a judgment. So, System 1 monitors the activities and inputs of System 1. So what can happen is that if no intuitive response is generated by System 1, then judgments and behavior are exclusively computed by System 2. But if System 1 provides an intuitive response, then System 2 may take contribution to by first they can endorse this response, which means that they are agreeing this and elaborating more on why this is the correct response. And then they can also adjust the response for other features that are recognized to be relevant. So for example, if System 1 is ignoring certain features, but System 2 think that it is something relevant, that they will just adjust the response so that it will recognize the relevant information. And then the third one, they can correct the response for a recognized bias. So if our initial intuition is more biased, and then when we think about it further using System 2, then we recognize then that there is a bias, then the System 2 will correct the response. And then the last one, they can also block the response from overt expression if it is identified to violate a valid rule of inference. And so here I'm going to present another experiment, uh, which is debunking the corrective misconception. So there is a misconception in System 2 and System 1, which is usually called as the corrective misconception. So it is often assumed that System 2 is the good friend that cleans up after the mess created by System 1. So usually people think that System 1 often make errors, and then System 2 is the one that takes responsibility in fixing the error. So in a research by Bago and Denise in 2019, which is recent, uh, they uh, basically they how this research is done is that they give the bat and ball question to participants, and they see how they proceed using the two systems. So the bat and ball question is, a bat and a ball together cost $1.10. I'm sorry if I made a mistake. And then the bat costs $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost? So the answer that usually pops up right after someone hear this question is that uh the ball costs ten cents. But the correct answer is actually 5 cents, which is it's a math, and I won't explain further. So the method that is used here is that first the participants were tasked to answer the parent ball question in a limited amount of time, and it is assumed that by giving a limited amount of time they will just use their intuition. But then, after giving their answer in a limited amount of time, then they are given another chance. So they can deliberate further to see if they will come up with another answer. So the result here actually is that most participants who answered correctly already had the correct answer in the first place. So their intuition is already correct. So the deliberation time is basically just used to verify the correct intuition. So why is this debunking is that uh, uh, it's because again it is often assumed that the system 2 is always cleans up after the errors made by system 1, but actually it's not always the case because as can be seen in this research, the the correct answer is actually made first by the intuition, so by system 1. So uh, just because we use system 2 doesn't mean we will get a correct answer. We can also get the wrong answer by system 2, and system just because we use system 1 doesn't mean it will be incorrect or it will be less correct than system 2, because as can be seen here, the one that answers correctly, most of them already answered correctly in the first place, so in the limited amount of time given to them, so they're using the system 1. So yeah, basically it's trying to denounce the notion that system 2 is better than system 1, and it's always more correct than system 1 and whatsoever. And then next we will proceed further into the criticism and future outlook. And so there are three criticisms here. The first one is for the phenomenon specific theories, which is the theories that is made back then during the earlier era of the development of dual process theories or models. So the first critic is that they equate distinct contents with distinct processes. And then it remains unclear how the different models are related to each other and what general principles of information processing underlie the studied phenomena. And then a criticism for the generalized dual process theories is that the first one, information processing can be parsimoniously described in terms of general if-then rules. And then the second one is that it ha they have a tendency to create list of process characteristics that may not necessarily overlap. And then the last one is that it is lacking conceptual precision. And then the criticism for more formalized dual process theory is that formalized models are often assumed to provide direct access to automatic and controlled processes, though the nature of their through the nature of their algebraic logic. So what I need to emphasize here is that because formalized dual process theories are more scientific, that's why they usually automatically determine whether a process is automatic or controlled by relating it to the nature of their algebraic logic that is used in the model, even though they might not always be the case. And then the outlook. So, dual process theories have made a huge impact on the social psychology field, as can be seen from the amount of research that has been inspired by them, which is a lot. And although there are some criticism about them, it is unlikely that their impact will die down. However, it is important to keep the development going. So, here I present two issues regarding dual process theories that can be considered in the future. So the first one is the usage of the terminology theories versus models. So theories are usually regarded as sets of well-specified if-then conditionals that link two or more concepts in a particular manner. Models, whereas models are regarded as nominal descriptions that provide a conceptual frame or of reference. So in dual process theories or models, the use of the terminology theories and models are usually interchangeable, so we don't specify enough. So, so the author here is trying to say that it probably would be better for us to not use those terminology interchangeably. And then the second one is how many processes are there. Oops, wait. so by so by the name dual process theories, a lot of theories argued that it is better to just use the dual processes distinction, which just means that there are two processes. But there are also others that are endorsing either single process or multiple process. So this is a question that needs to be answered: is how many process are actually there is in dual process theories. Okay, thank you. That's all for my presentation. I'm sorry if it took so long and if I include a lot of unnecessary information or I didn't include necessary information, but I hope this could uh, this could be useful information to everyone. So if you have any question or criticism or evaluation, you can say that you can uh, deliver it to me. Thank you.